Thank you very much. Well, let's get on to the questions, because actually some of what you've just described, actually we can tease out in the questions. I think there's some very interesting topics there. Just for those of you listening or participating, and we will ask for questions. We are going to have 3 questions, one about the past, one about the present, and one about the future. Pilar and I will ask the questions in turn, and then when we've got all of those answers, if you can save up your questions, we will then open it up to the floor for you guys to ask your questions as well. So, without further ado, I'd like to ask, so I think my first question is a question about the past. Egle, I think if I can, I'd like to start with you. And you mentioned something actually about role models. And we hear how important role models are in our world. Egle, I'd like to ask whether you have any role models or mentors that really helped you on the path that you have taken, and if there are any experiences you can share and learnings that you might have that we can make use out of. So a practical application as well. What can we do better? Have we just got one mic? Okay, please.
Hello. So thank you for this question. Actually, I believe that mentors and role models are very important for your career, especially when you start your career. And I was very lucky that I always had great mentors, because I have quite bold opinions and I'm not afraid to tell them to say those opinions. So I was very happy that my bosses were always willing to listen and to encourage me to have my own opinions and to propose suggestions that I thought could be beneficial for my organization. And really, you always need encouragement. And it's not only in tech, but I believe in all sectors. And what is difficult for women, especially in early stage of their career, that usually you come to a room full of men. And those men usually have, then you know, networking event. Just imagine any networking event where you go. And usually those men, they form circles. And women also form different circles, and they discuss different topics in different circles. And if you are women, or man actually, it's very difficult for you to enter woman or men's circle, because the discussions are very different in those circles. And if only men discusses something, and then you just enter that circle, everybody expects you to say something smart. So this was, I believe, the most difficult part for me, actually, to enter those circles and to participate as equal in those discussions. Then I started my career. Now it's a little bit easier, because I have a lot of experience, a lot of things to say, but I think this is the most important thing, not to be afraid to discuss different ideas and different topics with not only women, but also men, especially if you have more men in your organization than women.
So maybe the note from there is, if you're in a circle, open the circle up and encourage others in.
Sure.
You mentioned role models, mentoring in your speech. So I'm interested in how, Lora, and how you have found, whether you have found some good role models, and whether there are learnings we can take from the kind of role models you've had, or maybe not.
Thanks, Elizabeth. A very interesting question. And I think I'll switch from the formal part of what I've delivered in the statistics, etc., to the more emotional part of what actually I would feel in my heart. And I would actually probably start by my mom and some of the teachers, you know, because I agree with the colleague here. It's very, very important, even before you start your career, that you also get used to the opportunity to provide freely your opinion, indeed, to express yourself as a woman, to defend your views. It's not about being a feminist, it's just about being able to defend your ideas. I've certainly had a couple of role models. I can't, by the way, even think of all those that really not just influenced me, but inspired me during my career. And I had this opportunity indeed to work for women, including my current commissioner, that are very bold, that have strong ideas. also including exactly about what I started with, how to really express and defend our ideas. For me, that's the most important thing, not being afraid, not underestimate our potential, because indeed I believe that women, not just in the tech sector, are this incredible untapped potential that we should look into and further encourage. So basically, encourage themselves to, deploy the potential, to freely express their ideas and to defend them.
Thank you. So moving to Carolyn, perhaps I could ask you, as you are head of talent acquisition, I'd be interested to know how mentors play a role in corporate life, whether that's something that you think about, and whether you think it is just for women, or whether you think everybody should have mentors.
I'm going to answer sharply to this. I recruit people, so 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be talking with a man. This is not an issue, but at some point, I was a bit pissed off because I was attending scientific conferences, technical conferences, and I could see women were here, but they were not necessarily on stage. So that's when, besides my work, I created a meetup. So if you don't know what a meetup is, this is a platform online that enables people to actually connect together and to organize events related to common interests. So it's very big in the tech industry. I check out the numbers, and in Europe, every day, last year, there was 172 meetups organized. So over a year, it's roughly more than 62,000. So I'm saying that because I created a meetup with 3 other ladies, a researcher in machine learning, a data scientist, and a software engineer in machine learning. And it's called Paris Women in Machine Learning and Data Science. And within 1 year, we went from 0 to 1,700 members. So every 2 months, we organize an event with an academic talk, an industry talk, and the third part is always interactive. So the meetup only features women speakers. However, it's open to anyone, regardless of the gender or the background. And why am I saying that? It's because we are creating role models for existing engineers, researchers, and I hope somewhere, there's like students, female students who are checking what the meetups are doing, and checking the names of the speakers and saying, oh, I would like to be like her one day. So that's a super important thing for me as a professional, and within industries, it's quite common, companies, it's quite common to have mentorships. I would encourage it for everybody, not only women, because I truly believe there's a lot of papers on it, but actually there's some men that would like to have this kind of opportunity to talk with a peer. So it's extremely important to set this up. It's always a bit more difficult when you are in a small company, because there's a proximity that sometimes you don't really want to have.
And so finally, Melissa, so I know that you, so Melissa has done some TEDx talks, worth checking them out. One of them you talked a lot about serendipity. So I'm kind of interested about how, apart from uncertainty, which you managed to harness to your success, whether there were people who were inspirations for you or helped you in ways that, that might be helpful for us to know about.
Absolutely. I love the conversation about role models because we need them every day, but we especially need them at the youngest of ages. And it's, for me, it's not just the role models, it's moments, key moments. And sometimes the very normal moments we don't recognize as key until later on, that we thought, oh, this actually changed my thought, it changed my perception, and it's back to taking a look at that serendipitous opportunity and what do you make of it. And for me, this has been very key in all the things that I've had a chance to do, and sometimes my eyes were open and saw that serendipitous moment, and other times it maybe appeared later on. But I think of role models and I think of key moments, and when I think of one thing that launched my career was when I was at the age of 11, and I was reading a book. And I read a book called Cheaper by the Dozen, which was the story about Lillian Gilbert and Frank Gilbert, who were married, and they are industrial engineers. And I read about their profession, and I thought, this is so cool. And I closed the book, and at the same table was my mom. And I said, oh, it's too bad this isn't real, because I thought it's a book, so it must be not real. And she said, but of course it's real. That's a profession, and you can do that. So that was a key moment, and also two key role models, one that I was reading about, and also the person who was at the table with me. So we need to look at these moments that we can do not only for ourselves, but also for others, because every conversation we have with someone, every moment that we create is the potential of showing someone what's possible. And you were talking about what we look for is we look for inspiration. And we do need that. We need that at the youngest of ages, but we need that also at our age, at all moments. So for me, for the idea of serendipity, I've used that over and over again in order to be able to take what has been uncertain, but to turn it into a certainty. And to do that, I look around at the inspiration of people around me and the inspiration of what could be.
Well, now it's my turn for the raising the question. Well, thank you very much for these reflections on the role model. I think you all, touch upon different angles. And Melissa, you are very right in the sense of it is a role model, but the key moment. Mm-hmm. I would say that Disney Channel has a lot to do in this context. No, to tell you the truth, I mean, this is something. I mean, where people, children and teenagers and all this get sometimes this role model for sure. And the key moment even. So you mentioned you were reading a book and then you comment this with your mother and so on and so forth. But these ways of getting information or be like these audio-visual things and the Disney Channel, I put it like an example, but because it's funny at the same time, but it's something that to be considered, the role that all these channels can play. But I am turning to a different point, which is digitalization and labor flexibility, working flexibility in terms of have the potential to be attractive for women in order to decide to study tech or STEM in general, and the promotion inside the companies. I tell you one little story which it happened in Spain, which is a kind of a curiosity in some way. It's amazing because all the tech companies, all very much tech-based companies in Spain, the country managers, so the CEO of the companies, are women. That it is from Microsoft, from Google, from Facebook, from Siemens, from IBM, from HP, all are women. And it is not because we are in a different situation, in the, let's say, the gap, we have the same kind of gap, in some cases bigger than other countries. And when all those women were asked what was important for them, was they evaluate in a very positive way, they said because the working environment is much more flexible. And so that was very attractive, for them in order to not only to enter into the sector, but also to stay in the sector at the very high level. So if this is, an evidence that we have to consider, that means that as far as digitalization is permeating other sectors of the economy, so different business sector, we can consider that in principle has a potential for promote a better level playing field for gender, for women in this case. Which is your opinion on that? I mean, we are really facing a new era in which, because the digitalization of a range of new possibilities in terms of working conditions, flexibility is the key points, then there will be more, new factors that can, affect positively to the gender gap.
Do you want me to take this first? Okay. So definitely it's interesting what I see with another role that I have. So I am a professor in a university in New York, Paris, and Shanghai. And one of the things that I teach is about disruption and looking at new technologies. And one of the things that all of that is doing is creating a different future of work. So changing the environments that we're working in, changing in the flexibility and the schedule. I not only see that as a positive perspective for perhaps women who are looking for that flexibility, but also for men as well. The opportunity to be able to work differently could create a different family life. And it's provides the opportunity perhaps for it to be more equal and more shared with dealing with all the things we love to do. It's not, hopefully other people like me love to work, but also I love life, and we want to have everything, right? And I think it's possible for us to have everything. But the more that a flexible work environment is for our entire family, that's what makes that possible. And I think, I would like to think that is an encouragement for women to go towards any career as well. But also I think there's so much work that we need to do to bring women to that point of then, of course, the STEM careers, which is a different issue. What I love to think about with the future is the opportunity it brings for both men and women.
I also want to touch upon another issue, actually. When we speak about digitalization, of course, it affects every sector. And with the emerging technologies such as AI and blockchain, we see that more and more jobs will be created in those areas with new job titles will be created about which we don't know. But then we look at education. We still don't have coding classes in our primary schools. So how can we expect women to choose a career in this area if they don't learn about they don't learn coding or computer science at a very early stage? And I actually read a study where it was mentioned that girls should be exposed to computer science as early as possible, because after age 12 they are not interested in computer science anymore. And then I was at school. Actually, I remember that first computer science lesson I had when I was 15 years old. I don't know if education programs changed in schools, but I doubt about that. So we cannot expect changes in workplace if we don't make any changes in our education system.
I would like to live in Spain. Because, I was reading the Villani report. So it's a report that was released in France about a meaningful artificial intelligence. And the data about women in the field is awful. If you look at all the tech positions, you have 33% women. But if you take off all the cross-function positions and secondary positions, you have only 12% women. And another worrying number is that there's only, in Europe, 2% of the CTOs who are men. When you say that, only 2%, this is just horrendous. I would like organizations to actually, encourage non-self-nominating performance review. No, but for instance, if companies would stop self-nominating performance reviews and promotions, if they would stop, organizing dinner or conferences after 6 p.m., stuff like this, maybe, we would have great organizations that would encourage women to stay in the field. And I got the same number as you. There's 41% of women leaving a STEM position within their careers. When you say that, you're like, yeah, let's kick the stereotypes out. Let's build strong laboratories or companies in order to enable them to stay or move to Spain. Everybody.
Thank you. I would actually agree with all that my colleagues just said on this. However, one more example maybe. We've discussed in general the STEM studies, the ways to further promote that, that's clear. One more example that we also found rather shocking last week was the report that the Commissioner requested from EPRA. For those of you who don't know what this organization is about, I see some are nodding already, is the European Platform Regulation Authorities. And the requested report was about achieving greater diversity in broadcasting. Mrs. del Castillo was actually talking also about, women at work. I would also associate women with creativity, right? Normally speaking, I think we have many creative women around us, and our role models are actually role models also because they have ideas and they are creative. Why I say that this report was shocking? Again, because of a number of very worrisome statistics in this rather creative field. We are talking about broadcasting, meaning, media organizations, filmmaking, etc., etc. So let me just quote one or two, if you allow me. Only 1 in 5 films is directed by a woman, so 21%. The great bulk of the funding resources, 84%, go into films that are not directed by women, something to reflect on. Even though, in theory, women directors are not lacking. We have proportion of female directors that are graduating from the film schools and entering the film industry that is still at 44%. And the overall proportion of female directors working in the industry is eventually only 24%. So you see, again, failing numbers. To me, difficult to explain why. Maybe we should look indeed at the conditions of work, which is, by the way, why also the Commissioner and Commissioner Thyssen have just launched a high-level group in order to analyze these future of work conditions, especially in the area of broader sense digitization. So that's also yet another interesting figures that, well, interesting is probably not the word, shocking figures that we should look at.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, yes, make a comment, yes, a moment. After your comments, which I am sure we all appreciate very much. This is my question start on the impact and potential of the impact of digitalization in terms of a better level playing field. And I fully agree, as Melissa said, and some other comment, but mostly Melissa, on this is, as good for women that as it is for men. And this is absolutely the truth. I mean, then you can enjoy all this, that. But in terms of the deficits and the gaps and so on and so forth, there's no doubt, in my view, that this will have a higher impact in the case of women. But anyway, I mean, there is a number of things you mentioned on the, on the learning and the coding, and I am very much promoting myself, that coding should be compulsory in the schools, and because it's something very simple. Coding, to start with, give you the possibility to understand the logic of computational world and the internet world in the same manner that physics, chemistry, geology, and other subjects was introduced to permit you to understand the logic of the physical world. So you have to combine now both. So you need to understand the new logic that it is provided by computational science, as we in the past did it with the others. Well, that's... this is going...
I would maybe just add one thing about flexible working. In theory, I love the idea of flexible working. In practice, we also need to make sure flexible working doesn't mean never off. So the future question, I think, if I may just start with a little story, because it somewhat surprised me. I mean, we have a mixed panel in terms of age. I did not get to kind of this age without having experienced and fought a huge amount of gender bias and expectation about me. I remember being in a meeting when I was a lawyer. I was at Freshfields. We were in a meeting with clients. I was the lead. The clients came in. There was tea and coffee. And guess who they asked to pour the coffee? And I did not have the guts to say, I think you can do it yourself. I poured the coffee before I started the meeting. Okay, so, you know, the world I grew up in was not a world that I think my children will grow up in. I hope it's not. But I was really shocked, and that's why I wanted to start with a little story. So last Friday night, we were sitting around the table. My husband and I have 4 children, 3 girls and a boy. And I thought it'd be interesting to ask them what they thought about the subject and what their views were. And I said to all of them, you know, I'm doing this event, to which my son said, where are the men on the panel? Okay, fair enough. And I said to the girls, but presumably none of you experience it. And the youngest one is 15 and the oldest one is 24, so we've got quite a good spread. I said, in your world, it must be easier, right? I was really shocked. My daughter, my eldest daughter, at 24, said, Mum, we suffer this every day. Like, she is in the science world. She's about to start on her PhD, so she's had quite many years of experience. And she said, when we are in lecture theatres, no matter whether the lecturer is male or female, when they ask questions, the men are the guys with their arms up first, and the men are the ones who are asked for the questions. And it's always the same. To which the youngest, 14, said, yeah, I find, and she's a brilliant mathematician, I find in my maths class exactly the same. There are far more boys than girls by something like, I think it's 85% guys in the further maths and the rest girls. And when the questions are asked, the questions are directed at the boys and the boys answer the questions. Now, I find that shocking, absolutely shocking. I wonder how many teachers have done unconscious bias training. I think they all should, and maybe we all should be doing it. Maybe that's something, I think we're asked a question later for the film, you know, what should the EU be doing? Maybe that's one thing, right? Making sure that unconscious bias training is, if not mandatory, really, really highly recommended for every company, large and small, and in schools. Because, as you said, it starts at primary school. Which kind of, I suppose, leads me quite neatly to the last question, which is, if you have a magic wand, what is the one thing you would do that you think would make a difference for your children and for their children? And maybe we'll start with Egle. Yeah. Please.
Very funny, because I had the same experience as you had with the coffee just a few years ago. And what happened, actually, I had many different experiences in like this, but what happened, I was a little bit older at that time, and I had experience how to fight these kind of bias. And then I just joined the circle of men, and we had negotiations at that time, and the leader of the other party asked me. He just turned and asked me for. He said, "I would like white coffee, please." And I said, "Oh, it's a good idea. I would like also to have one." So I already had an answer for that, but I was a little bit more experienced and older at that time. But I could share a lot of more stories about that. But to answer your question, just one thing I would do, I would actually have those compulsory coding classes at school. I think you cannot compete if you don't have skills, and skills are the most important. Other things you will learn with age and experience you have in different positions, but skills are the most important, and I would stick with that.
Great. Yeah, it's when you shared your story, of course, you can't help it, but all these things come flooding back into your memory. Like, oh, I thought I got rid of that one. But it does bring up the idea of the magic wand, and there's one incident that happened to me that I think is a bit of that driving force that I have today, and the reason why I founded the organization that we have. When I got my first job, as an engineer. So you know that feeling when you get your first job? You're so excited. So I came like leaping back into the university, like I got my first job. And then, of course, my friends were there, all of my engineering student colleagues, or classmates, and they were all guys. And they said, oh, well, it must be nice. And I said, yes. And they said, well, you know why you got the job. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, you got the job because you're a woman. And, you know, I never thought of that. I mean, and it's very naive of me to say that, because here I went through engineering school where I was like the only girl in the room all the time. But didn't really think that that was actually what I was getting into when I was leaving. And the thing is that really bothered me is that I let it bother me. So I went into my first job with that lack of confidence because I was uncertain, really, why did I get the job? Was I supposed to get the job? Am I good enough for the job? Was it because I was a woman? So that's the magic wand that I would change, is that that shouldn't be the case. We shouldn't have that, that worry that we're trying to meet some sort of quota, that, or whatever it is that we may have gotten it that we didn't deserve. And for me, in order to do that, and I go back to what I said before, we have to educate from the youngest of ages. And it's educating girls and boys. It's talking about what their possibilities are for the future, the importance of STEM, the importance of things for any career at all, the importance of knowing that anything is possible, and the opportunity for one day for someone to be with that exact same situation, and that they would have the confidence to just laugh, because the idea that someone would have gotten a job because of their gender would be absolutely ludicrous. And that's what I would want for my magic wand.
I'm not going to be original because unconscious biases are one of my favorite topics. So if I can make one wish is to actually be able to train every recruitment team, every head of school, every head of research lab, or every manager in charge of a team about unconscious biases, because you can't fix something you're not aware of. So that's the wish I would like to formulate.
That's still a very beautiful wish, I think. For me, I won't be original either, because clearly all the objectives, frankly, policy objectives that we've had in this area, if they get accomplished, hopefully in the not that long term, I think my commissioner, myself, all the team will be extremely, extremely happy. Also, thanks, frankly, to the brilliant cooperation we have with Mrs. del Castillo and other MEPs in this house on this topic. Having said that, so it goes about increase participation of girls in tech. Definitely about the bigger percentage in the code week. Very, very important for us. That's why we spend so many efforts on this. There is one more topic that we haven't mentioned, and it's yet another initiative of my commission, which I think is extremely important, and that's the safer internet. Safer internet for all of us, but also our kids, because I think that's another threat that we haven't really discussed here, simply because the topic was slightly different from that. But that's something, indeed, as a magic one that I would like to see. You know, make the internet safer, so that we, as also moms and women, are sure that, you know, our kids are not exposed to any threat when they're surfing. Thank you.
Pilar, do you have a magic wand? What would you do?
Well, I think, well, it's very clear. We have to, in my view, to distinguish maybe three different, let's say, magic wands, one in the long run, one in the mid one, and one in the short one. In the three of them, you have to act in some way. In the long run, there is no doubt. I mean, the only solid way for that is education, which all the components you mentioned here, and we fully, I mean, me myself fully agree from, you know, in all respects in the specific areas such as coding and so, but many more. I mean, it is it's education. In the mid and, mostly because it's short, define short is very difficult. So in a week, or in a month, or in a year, maybe you cannot do so much. But I think one of the aspects that I will underline beyond the flexible conditions and the impact in all sectors, but in the tech sector, as well, in terms of working conditions and so on and so forth, it is to underline the idea that there is a business case. I mean, that was, we were commenting, Pastora, Valero and myself, and I firmly believe that there is a business case. Saying that means that for companies, in order to have the tech profiles and STEM profiles that is needed for the economy in today's days go on and go in a competitive global way is extremely important. But for the nations, the countries, the government, this is extremely important as well. When I put an example, when in Spain, in let's say in the 60s, there was a problem with employment. It was only active policies to incorporate women to the labor market. The one that in the end, it made a difference in terms of growth in the economy. So it's in some way quite similar. I mean, if the number of women is 3.1 less than men in the tech sector, so only increasing that you solve many problems that your economy have in order to be competitive. And this is a reality. You need that. So I would add in let's say short midterm also to my magic wands beyond education. Beyond education. This concept of it's a business case, it's a really country case, it's a national case, or whatever you want to framework and
Pilar,
put
shall
the
we
envelope.
open it up to the floor? Maybe
Yes,
some people have some
absolutely.
questions.
Now it's time for you.
If